Good evening, everyone. We'll call our North Middlesex Council meeting for Wednesday, September 21st to order. Roll call. We have everyone here. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. If you have any, please forward it to Richard. Minutes of the previous meeting for September 7th. Any errors or omissions or business arising? Seeing none, we need a motion. Councillor Moyer, Councillor Nickel, all in favor? Carried. At this time, I would just ask our CAO to make an introduction to our newest staff member.
Through your worship, members of council, and to the general public, I'd like to introduce Jaden Hodgins as our new manager of infrastructure and operations. Jaden comes as a professional engineer to the organization with around 10 years of experience in the municipal side and a wealth of knowledge in politics as well too. So welcome, Jaden. You're officially part of the North Middlesex team and part of our live YouTube stream as it would be tonight. So thank you.
Welcome, Jaden. Delegations, we have none. Department reports. The first one is a report from the drainage superintendent. Petition received and to appoint engineer for a new municipal drain. So, Jaden.
So through you, Mr. Chair, nothing to add, just reports on the table as presented, but questions.
Is there any questions on this? This is to appoint R. Dobbin as the engineering firm. Any questions on it? Seeing no questions, motion by Councillor Keogh and Councillor McClinchy, all in favor, carried. Our next is a report from the fire chief in agreement with Middlesex Center for the Fire Prevention Services. Greg, go ahead.
For your worship, members of council, what you have in front of you is a recommendation renew our agreement with Middlesex Center to provide fire prevention and investigation services for the next 3 years. Is there any questions?
Councillor Nickel, and then Deputy Mayor.
There's no cost on this. Is it the same cost as it has been?
The way we build it is per hour per kilometer. Up to the end of July this year, we are at $12,600. 2020 and 2021 are probably not very big. I think on track. Don't seem too hampered by.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
My question is along the same line. What is the hourly rate? There's no indication what the costs are whatsoever. It refers to rates, it refers to mileage, but there's no indication what the actual costs are or what the hourly rate is.
So the previous agreement specified a dollar amount, which I believe was job rate, top level. This is the second fire prevention officer. So what we agreed is we will pay that rate, not the higher rate in case there's turnover. So as that rate goes up, our hourly rate, but we're not paying the top rate when we're getting these entry level. They're paid the entry level.
Can you be a little bit more specific and share with us what exactly the rate is? Not top, not bottom. What is the rate?
I believe it's around $53.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and maybe we can even get that confirmed if you want. We should ask and get confirmation. We could maybe have an email sent out to council as to the rates. The mileage rate is their standard mileage rate, correct?
Through your worship, I believe you are correct. It is the standard CPI or
If I may, worship, it is the rate set by CRA and revenue agency. So this year it is 61 cents.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Any other questions for the chief? Seeing no other questions, we have a recommendation in front of us. Moved by Councillor Hemming. Seconder, Councillor Keogh. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Greg. Passing of accounts. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Report. Oh, your report, sorry, for the Conservation Authority Act.
Through your worship, members of council, the report before you is for information and it revolves around an update for the changes for the Conservation Authority. The recommendation be be resolved that council receive this report as information. I'd only like to highlight a couple of discussion points before I open the floor to questions. This is the second phase of the rollout to the Conservation Authority in terms of governance change. The first one being effective last year and January 26, 2022 this year, when phase 2 came into effect, which mimics more of a consultation period until full rollout and implementation by January 1, 2024. The biggest item to identify within this report or the background is that there is a 3-phased approach on services that each conservation authority must refine and go to the municipality in terms of soliciting fees towards their levy for services. There's mandatory, non-mandatory, and optional services. Some of those options include education to our local schools. Some of them include assessments for planning and for other consultation periods. You will also note there are 2 draft memorandums of understanding, one of them being identifying the services and the contributions thereof, and the second one being associated strictly with planning services as it relates to Bill 109 coming through. I can say in terms of reviewing other agreements and looking at other positions of conservation authorities that ABCA has actually offered a preliminary budget. The only thing I would like to note about that is depending on the services that we go into and that others may opt out of, that may adjust as we go through, and ABCA would have the opportunity to kind of reassess. The position in a consultation meeting that I had with the chair is that we're just setting the ground rules right now of how we're going to interact, and more information will come forward in the next year to be presented to council. With that being said, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Jonathan, one of the questions I had, and I know I asked it at the authority itself when I was on the board member there, is under the More Homes, More Choice and under the Planning Act, the municipality is bound by a time commitment to expedite the approval process, but sometimes it's dependent upon what the conservation authority's contribution to the planning process. If they delayed that, that would have a negative impact on our approval process, would it not?
Through your worship to the deputy mayor, that is correct. And to get one step ahead of you, that is the same commentary that I'm going to reflect through our discussions in the planning memorandum of understanding. We're going to have to refine and figure out how that relationship works. And I think ABCA is even asking themselves that as well.
Thank you.
So, other questions? No other questions right now? It is a long report. I read through it once. I'm going to have to read it again because it's long. My question to you is, through this process, as it starts to expand, for the new council coming in, what's an appropriate time for AuSable Bayfield to come and talk to the new council?
Through your worship, I would suggest that we would start with our baseline that we've always done with some of our stakeholders and have an education session first to understand what they're actually offering with some framework for the options. And then probably in the third quarter and certainly by the fourth quarter, we have to have a very good grasp on this. So I would suggest either at the end of the first quarter or second quarter that we do the education and then we continue on with the negotiations. Because really this is council's decision on some of these phases or some of these options to join in on. So you need to have a full breadth and scope of what is offered in terms of services to us and to, I would even say, our constituents as well too, because we may never see a presentation at a school, but that's invaluable information for children in an academic world, right? So we need to fully understand that and the cost before we make all these decisions.
So you think late in the first quarter or early in
Or
the?
it could be early in the new year. I'm just trying to be cognizant of the fact that they're going to have to do this exact same approach with all the other all the municipalities of their service. And ABCA is a large one, so they're going to have to go out. But that was extended in the pre-consultation meeting that they'd be willing to do that, and we can certainly do it by year's end. It's just what is relative and fresh in new council in terms of discussing this moving ahead.
And we want to time it where there's some answers to some of the questions that they really don't quite have yet.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on that, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've neglected to add that the Conservation Authority has also been transitioned from the Ministry of Environment to Ministry of Natural Resources under their jurisdiction now. And for members of council interested and staff as well, There are three presentations, webinars coming up by the conservation authorities, the ministry, MNR, on the phases coming up on October 12th, the 20th, and November 3rd, and each one addresses a specific phase of the new act. And you can register online and they'll send you the information for the webinar.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Any other questions for Jonathan at this time? There's going to be a lot of conversation on this before this is done. So, all right. Thank you. We have I think, recommendation to receive it as information. Moved by Councillor Nichols, seconded by Councillor Keo. All in favor? Carried. Now the passing of accounts. I see we have our treasurer there. How are you, Estelle?
I'm good, thank you. So the report in front of you outlines the municipality's expenses for the period of August 26th to September 14th, totaling $1,463,113. I open the floor for questions.
Questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Rupp. I did have several questions which Estelle had answered previously. And I think the only one that the members of council may be interested in, Estelle, is my question regarding to the Scheitzel bucket truck repair, because that caught me off guard. I thought it was our bucket truck, so I wasn't really clear what that was.
Through your worship to the deputy mayor, the description of bucket truck repairs does not refer to repairs to the actual bucket truck, but repairs that the bucket truck was utilized for. And what it was for, it was changing the lights at the ball diamond, that we have no other way of doing it but to rent a bucket truck.
Thank you, Estelle. And I think just in addition to that, I was looking at my notes here. I think it might be of interest as well to have a better understanding of the YMCA $20,200 deficit as well that we discussed earlier.
Okay, thank you. So basically what it is, that is a net loss for Q2 for the YMCA. But having said that, although that is not good, we have received reports that their revenues for July and August exceed their losses for the year so far. So by the end of the year, they should be in a net positive position.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the treasurer? Seeing no other questions? Move the recommendation by Councillor McClinchy, second by Councillor Moyer. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Estelle.
Thank you.
Committee reports, Lake Huron Primary Water, anything there?
No, we have a meeting coming up October 3rd.
October 3rd?
Yep.
ABCA,
Yes, Mayor Rupp, there was an additional item. As I discussed previously, there was an item on our agenda previously, if you look on the September 15th agenda, for the Horticulture Society to assume responsibility for the flowers at the scenic lookout on the park at the Park Hill Dam. This caught me a little bit off guard, and in speaking to the Asalba Bayfield about it, the Horticulture Society will assume full costs and full responsibility for all the work that's being done there. So I asked that matter be deferred until such time because I felt it was a budget item. Since that time, I had a discussion with the chair of that committee, Miss Marion Robinson, and she advised me that what those funds were the funds that were approved last year, but were not utilized because there was no flowers purchased. So they're planning on using those funds. So I don't know if council needs to approve that. That's something that I think I would like to bring forward so that I can bring it up with the Conservation Authority.
Through your worship to the deputy mayor, I'll have to look into that a little bit more. There's obviously a transfer of funds that went over. The intention was for flowers. It all depends on how the request came in, but I'll certainly investigate that with the treasurer tomorrow.
Thank you. We've deferred the matter until early in the year after a budget process, because initially that's what I thought it was, but maybe we can, once I get your information, we can change that.
So on that, if I can, just, and I'll come to you in a second. When you get out there with that tractor and trailer, that's a lot different traffic out there at the scenic lookout than what it is in town. The speed of the traffic, and I'm just wondering, is there any safety concerns for them doing that?
Well, Mr. Mayor, as a person who actually stood on that trailer watering flowers, I can share with you that there are some risks involved in there. Some of them are, I'm not sure, self-inflicted, mind you. But yeah, the traffic is an issue, particularly out that way, because they do come in at increased speed. And that tractor, it does have warning signs and warning apparatuses on it, but not everyone pays attention to it.
Okay.
For clarification, when we budget for flowers for Elsa Craig as well as Park Hill, I didn't know it covered the conservation area.
That's a new proposal by the Horticulture Society.
Oh, really?
It's a new proposal. Currently, the Lions Club, I believe, looks after the flowers at the arch, and they will continue to do so. There are other flowers there as well that my understanding is that Horticulture Society approaches Salva Bayfield to assume responsibility for those flower beds.
So conservation is going to put money towards it or just?
No.
No,
No,
really?
it's fully funded by the Horticulture Society, which in turn would be an impact on
Well,
our
it'd be
budget.
from us, the town itself,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
And that they did not, they used the money so far for the Main Street flowers.
Through your worship, yes, so what this might be just a one-off year because they had deferred the planting because
Yeah.
the potential construction and the impending construction of Parkdale Main Street would disrupt them. So the funding was rolled out because at the time we didn't know the timing of the award. Now we're getting a little bit better. It could have happened this year, but they're looking to do that. I think a little bit of a shot in the arm at the scenic lookout, plant some, I'm hoping some perennials so that it could last year over year rather than the flowers that we see on a regular basis. But we'll look into it. I'll engage with the Horticulture Society. We'll hash out the best approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Anything else for Salvo Bayfield? No. Blue Water Recycling. Economic Development, Local School Advisory. I know we're getting into close to elections.
Yeah, so a communication did go out about getting another meeting before the election.
Okay.
However, I don't think their response has been real positive at this point, so I don't think we're going to see another meeting at this
Okay.
point.
All right. The Rec Committee.
We'll have our last meeting in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Policy, we haven't had a meeting there, but Jonathan?
Through your worship, we will be deciding on, there are some legislative policy that needs to come forward to council. Most likely that will go straight to council just so that we follow our timelines. And we do have a backlog of policies that we'd like to table to get back moving again with that committee. So more to come in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Fire Committee
Nothing at this time.
and Aqua? Nothing there. Okay, correspondence, Town of Blimpton, Wyoming, Town of Kingsville, resolution from Town of Wasaga Beach, opposition to the Strong Mayor's Building Homes Act. We did support that on September 7th. Township of Ashfield, Colburn, Wawanosh, Ontario Wildlife Damage Compensation Program. Receive and file. Leanne Rude, the proposed Lambton-Kent Middlesex boundary redistribution.
Mr. Mayor.
Receive and consider. Councillor Moyer and then Deputy Mayor. Okay, go ahead.
Through the worship to the Councilor Moyer, the intention, although the framework on the organization in terms of support from the organization is yet to be fully understood. The request from Leanne's office was that we table this for the general public so that they understand how to interact with the communication. So we'd encourage everybody individually to do that as well. That was a request that she had put in, and this is more as information as another platform to get to the public to say this is an avenue.
Okay, thank you.
And if you see it, you see how it is now, and then the next one shows what they're suggesting, and then she also has another option where it's a much smaller impact.
Yeah, again, it's
Um,
sort of after the rural community again. I mean, the
Well, we would,
the
our
urban is impacting the rural more than the other way around.
new riding, if it would stay like the way they're proposing, it goes from Salvo Beach all the way down here to the end of so Lucan and North Middlesex, Lucan Badolf and North Middlesex would be going up to Huron County into those. It's really breaking the county up. And actually, if you look at Thames Center, they would be in 3 different ridings. Some of it in the city, and 2 different ridings, so, and 2 other ridings. So it's, yeah. And so we did have a quick consultation with her. Jonathan and I were invited, and Allison Warwick, Mayor of Thames Center, and Kathy Burkhart was invited as well as the mayor, and Ron Reimer. So
The boilerplate items to note is that this federal review is done every 10 years. So it doesn't matter if it's if it's just, yep, we did it, it has to be at least opened up. So this is a proposal in front of every resident in Canada to a certain extent. And there is one seat that they are creating in Ontario that is triggering this reshuffling. There's some numbers there that delineate 110 to 120,000 plus or minus, I believe, in that wheelhouse. Might even be lower than that, 105,000 for representation within a geographical area. The other thing to note is that it might not be as fluid in this, but in the documents presented, but typically after the riding has changed federally, 4 years after provincially, they change. Sometimes they change on the municipal side of things, but that's usually the trickle down effect. It's going to go federally and then provincially. So that'll be really our big impact if it does go to the provincial, but it starts usually with the federal reexamination of the boundary.
So, yeah, and we've talked about all of our traffic is towards London, Strathroy. And I think in Lucan, it would add St. Mary's to that as well, probably some of their flow of people, but our services all come from Middlesex County, our social services, all of our interests and all of our work and stuff goes that way. So, yeah, we're certainly made that case. And I know probably Lucan, Vidal, ourselves and Thames Center have the biggest impact of this change. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. And just to add to that, I had the opportunity to speak with the Deputy Mayor of Lambton Shores, and they've also had a meeting with Leanne Root as well, expressing their displeasure and unhappiness with the transition as well. They prefer that remain as is.
Yeah, or at least as close as possible. I mean, I know they are going to add another riding in Ontario, but it's just add the riding in Brampton and get it over with. But that's my own, like, that's where the population, that is where the extra population is. And so just add the riding and keep it simple. But yeah, a little bit. So is there anything else on that? Okay, Municipality of Brighton changes to healthcare connect systems for members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Receive and file. Municipality of Huron East and Canadian Center for Rural Creativity, Rural Talks to Rural 2022. Receive and file. That's it for correspondence. Other or urgent business? Councilor Moyer.
We've had some phone calls on the new bylaw contract, when that will come into effect, when they'll be out starting to enforce some of the bylaws. One of them was the dog inspections. Wondering when that's going to proceed.
Through your worship to Councillor Moyer, so the agreement is signed. So we've technically retained them for 3 days a week for services. I would encourage we are dealing with a backlog, to be fully transparent. So I would encourage any resident, especially with the dog kennel inspection, to reach out to us ASAP so that we can get that going. But we can certainly put that on the docket for discussion. Honestly, we've been focused about the backlog of some of the compliance issues. So we'll look a little bit further ahead to deal with some of these other ones.
I'll be glad to pass that on to you.
Deputy Mayor Canelson.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Just to add to that, the Oswego Bayfield also signed a contract with the same organization for their bylaw. I asked a question there, and I'll ask it now here as well, I guess, given that we had an incident a while back. Will this bylaw officer be carrying handcuffs?
Through your worship, to the deputy mayor, I'd have to confirm that to tell you the honest truth, but I don't know if I've ever seen them wear handcuffs. Richard, I don't know if you can offer anything.
Thank you. Through your worship to the deputy mayor, I don't believe that they are authorized or trained. I think that the OPP would have some very considerable interest in that if that occurred.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business? No? No other business? All right, defer items from previous meeting are always listed. Communications, county council highlights. Has everybody seen the highlights that are there? If you do see on that, on the readjustment of the boundaries, the county is making a presentation to that. Okay. So it was discussed at the county meeting as well. Reading of the bylaws.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two bylaws that are set before council tonight. Bylaw 098 of 2022 is authorizing the agreement with the municipality of Middlesex Center for Fire Prevention and Fire Safety Services. And the second bylaw is a confirming bylaw, which is 099 of 2022.
First and second, Councilor McClinchy, Councilor Keo, all in favor? Third and final, Councilor Moyer, Councilor Nickel, all in favor? Carried. Just one left. Move to adjourn. Councilor McClinchy, this is a perennial thing for her, by the way, Jaden, just so you know. Moved by Councilor